Kapil, welcome to Becoming Okay. How are you doing today?
Hey, doing pretty good. Thank you, Meg. Thanks for having me.
It's so lovely to see you again. I obviously, for a second, fangirl. Anyone that's watching will see, but I bought a book that you were a part of, and I told you that it's been really interesting to not only read your story a bit deeper, but the other gentlemen in the story. I've only read a couple of the men's stories so far, and it's been really fascinating actually hearing that side of the mind and mental health coming from a man's perspective versus the traditional woman's perspective. And so I obviously want to dive a lot deeper into that with you today because I know you have a very interesting story and it's brought you to exactly where you are today. But I want to start really mid-30s time. You told me that you were feeling very numb. And I wanted to ask you what that meant to you because it was interesting. I was on a dog walk this morning and I always ring my mum on my dog walks. I love catching up with her during that time. And we knit and natter away about anything and everything. And I told her that I was looking more and more into my antidepressants and the medication. And one of the things that I really dislike about medications is this numbness feeling that comes with them. And also how I'd learned recently that numbness isn't what we all perceive it to be. It's not like zero emotion. It's actually too many emotions all at once. And you just kind of send yourself into like a shock. And I wondered if it felt similar for you when you described that numbness feeling. Like, what did that look like?
Great question to start with. I think when I look back, I used to feel quite proud that I was numb, in that nothing could impact me. You could put me in any situation, the worst situation, and I'll be fine. Name of the book.
Hmm.
uh, what it did was it reduced the quality of my life. When I look back, I was living in a very narrow bandwidth of emotions, um, suppressing anything that was emotionally too intense. So any kind of heartbreak, any kind of, you know, something intense happening in my life. Like, for instance, my dad passed away when I was in my 20s. My mom had breast cancer. Coming from an Indian family, it was a big, and I'm the eldest son, so there's like a lot of responsibility in that culture. And emotionally, it had a huge impact on me. And I ended up suppressing everything to the point that I was feeling uh, numb in the sense that I was okay with anything. Um, I wouldn't go to any extreme low emotion, but then also I didn't really feel anything too joyous. It was just like a monotonous kind of life where um life was just, I was like robotic, uh not allowing myself really, and that's what I mean by numb in that sense. So yes, there's a lot of intensity and emotions coming my way, but I would either suppress it or reject it, in that nothing phases me. And uh, I think a lot of men could probably relate to that, in that we've been um, conditioned to um, not show emotions, not feel too much, because it's not productive. You know, so that was my case, and what hit me was I realized that I wasn't really feeling much happiness or joy in life, and I didn't think that that was a result of not allowing myself to feel the emotions, like the intense emotions of sadness or heartbreak or anything like that, because I was rejecting them. I didn't know that that was possible, but now looking back, sure, like if you don't allow yourself to go down, you can't feel the lighter emotions either. So yeah, that was my experience around like mid 30s.
Mm, I can totally resonate with that. It's that whole, I just don't care. And also
Right.
like, pardon my French, but like, fuck it. Do you know what I mean? Just fuck it. I can do this now. Like nothing phases me anymore. And I think a lot of people would think, isn't that the goal? Not to go through life overthinking too much. Surely that's bliss. Why are we talking about it under a negative light? And I remember seeing something online, gosh, a few weeks back now, and it was a guy describing how he spoke to his therapist and how she was saying that you need the lows in order to experience the highs of the highs. And if we all just seek that middle ground, think of us like a heart monitor, we would just flatline. There's just nothing going on. And I think that's a really great way of describing why having emotions is a great thing. They do come with the lows, but they do come with the greatness.
Yeah. And I would say being alive is about uh, feeling the whole spectrum of emotions. And I think this is a misconception. Um, I think a lot of people have, yes, the goal is to keep moving while we go through intense emotions. Yes. What ends up happening is because we don't have, nobody's taught us how to be with intense emotions. So we end up thinking that suppressing those emotions is how we do that. And, part of the emotional intelligence, a big part of emotional intelligence is emotional regulation. And that is a very misunderstood part of emotional intelligence, because we think that by suppressing or by ignoring those emotions is how we regulate. No, 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 no. The way we regulate is we allow ourselves to feel all of the emotions, but build up the framework inside us that we can not only feel everything, but alchemize it and work through it and keep moving and not get attached to those emotions, not be like swayed all the time by those emotions. And I think that's ultimately the goal, in that, yes, we do want to keep moving. Otherwise, you know, intense emotions, living, for instance, I'm in London, emotions are everywhere. Like, it's an intense city. You won't be able to do anything. Uh, but the goal is to, I think at least, is to feel everything, to live your entire, like, if life is happening 150 miles an hour, you want to live life where it's happening. You want to experience everything and keep moving and master that, as opposed to life is happening at 150 miles an hour over there and I'm sitting over here on my chair just watching life pass by, which is what I did for a long time.
Mm. Do you know what? I read, it was this year, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And I actually read
Right.
it going in from like a relationship standpoint. I didn't realize reading the book I was going to learn so much about how men and women are actually wired differently. And I know that sounds odd because it would seem obvious that you and I function differently because of our sex, but I didn't know how differently. And when you had said that men are scared of emotion, or they put two and two together and it makes them feel funny about it because they think they'll be less productive or maybe less successful, where does that come from? Like, why is that a thing for men?
Yeah, I would say masculine conditioning, not just men. More so, I think, I would say women also have that these days, and that is to do with, um, generally speaking, men or boys being associated with color blue, girls being associated with color pink, and everything, all of the things that come with that. In that, boys are taught, or used to, which is in a good good way that is changing in our culture now. But still, quite a large part of society still tells boys to not show emotions, not feel sensitive, that vulnerability is weak. While for the emotional burden is usually on the girls. For girls, it's like, oh, no, no, you have to be in your limit. You can't show too much emotions or too much desire. You have to, like, curb the thing, but you're allowed more range of emotions than boys are. Or that's when I was growing up, that was the case. And I think that's where the other thing that comes with, generally speaking, in our culture is boys are given this additional responsibility that you're the one who's going to be the provider. You're going to be the one who is uh, going to perform, and that will define how good a man you are, whether you are masculine enough or not. So our self-worth gets attached to this idea of how good we are, and we live our life. And I'm generalizing, obviously, here. I think a lot of people, irrespective of gender, can probably relate to that now. But what ends up happening is that we start to live our life proving that we are better than others. because that is the only way we can define that we are good enough. So we're continuously living our life in this better than, less than place, and we are competing. And then there are these short moments when we achieve something, and there's a relief, like, oh, I've proven myself. And now I can feel that I'm worthy. I can feel that I'm man enough, that I can feel that I'm good enough. So I think that is where a lot of this conditioning comes from, which is what I like. Rather than saying just men, it's largely men. But I like to call it a production based masculine conditioning, because what ends up happening is we go in this performance um, uh, lifestyle, achieving, striving, but then we shun all of the emotions, because then women take all of the burden of the emotion in that way. So that is where I think this cultural conditioning, call it the masculine conditioning and the feminine conditioning, operates in our culture quite a lot.
And for you, though, because I remember referencing back to the Being Fine book and reading your extract that you wrote in there, that actually traced back a lot of this, a lot of how you suppressed your emotions was back when you were young. I think you were around
Yeah.
7, and someone told you, like, you're being way too sensitive. How are you going to get through life being this
Yeah, my
emotional?
mom.
Yeah, I remember when we first spoke about it, and I think I vaguely remember it was to do with your cousins, and I'll let you share. But when I reread the story and I'd heard that your mum said it, that shocked me a little bit.
Well, it's funny, right? I think
Mm.
we don't realize, but a lot of the conditioning of suppressing sensitivity and emotions in boys comes from mothers, not from necessarily from from the paternal uh, figure. It was true for me. I think I've spoken to a lot of people, and a lot of people do say, "Oh, yeah, that is true." And I don't think there is anything sinister or you know uh, like that in there. I think that it was a way for her to protect me, you know, because I was a very sensitive kid. The story that's in the book is about my cousins. They used to come live with us during summer vacations, and I just didn't have in me to go and see them off at the train station. So I would just like sit at home and feel very lonely and sensitive and cry. And that's when my mom, uh, wanting to take care of me, just said, "Oh, you're so sensitive. How are you gonna live in this world if you're this sensitive?" Now she obviously didn't mean that I suppress everything, but a 6-year-old, 7-year-old boy, I took it as, oh, this is something wrong. My sensitivity or feeling this much is wrong, and I shouldn't allow myself. And then there was like these chain of events throughout my life when, if I went through a heartbreak or anything happens where I was feeling low, I just said, oh, this is somehow wrong. I shouldn't allow myself to feel this much. So over a period of time, I just ended up suppressing all of that. And that's what got to the 35-year-old feeling numb. Uh, nothing affects me.
It's a it's a scary burden for any parent to carry, I'm sure, that something that they say in a moment and feeling like it's coming out another way that it's being taken. Like
Yeah.
that would make me worried as a parent, because coming from that angle of hearing it just from what you heard, I felt what you heard. But coming in from the angle of how your mum said it, I felt how she said it. It must be a really tricky thing now, particularly now in the 21st century, where those conversations are far more open. Like you say, your scenario, you're crying over your cousins, and that happened to you in 2025. The mum would film it and put it on TikTok and be like, "Oh my gosh, like look how sad he is. He just loves his family." Like, it's such a different world now, but it's extra sensitive. So there's that
Yeah.
burden weighs even heavier on parents.
Yeah. I feel there's a couple of things there. I feel that I'm in no shape, way or shape blaming my mother. I've had these conversations with her, um, over the years, and she was surprised. She didn't know that that's how it affected me. Um, We have great relationship, always had. And I think there's a way we think that we can find a perfect way of being. And there's just, it just doesn't exist, you know. Like we will end up with some kind of conditioning. We will create some kind of core beliefs. And as we get older, as we become more self-aware, we will have to do the work on that conditioning, on those self-beliefs anyway. Um, so I think that there's that part where it's like, oh, I think we've become a bit too like, oh, I need to now handle everything. I have to be really, really sensitive. Sure, I think that a bit of self-awareness is important, um, so that there isn't, not a lot of trauma in a child's life. And at the same time, I think everyone has to do their own work. Everyone has to go through this kind of a process. So, like the extra additional sensitivity that we have now, and that'll have its own issues in culture. And when that happens, we'll deal with it. But I think there's more self-awareness. That's a good thing.
Hmm. And that can
People
come
are more
from,
aware.
yeah, and that's any element of life, isn't it? I'm sure a lot of people have built up a different self-belief just by the people they hung around with in school. Like, I think that has a
Yeah.
massive impact. Everything in your childhood does. I wonder though, for someone like you, that we're talking, well, almost like 3 decades of gradually suppressing more and more. How do you get to your mid-30s and begin to work on making a change to do the opposite? Biggest question.
Well, it's difficult. I say usually that willingness is the first step. Uh, there's also this thing that I've come to believe, that we only change from inspiration or desperation, and mostly from desperation. I think I was at a point in my life where I was going through a divorce. I had built a reasonably successful professional career, and I had the space or time to consider these things. Um, and I was at a place where, like, I have no idea what is happening, why it's happening, but something doesn't feel right. I don't feel the joy that I should be feeling now that I've ticked all these boxes. I should feel more alive. I should feel, there's a sense of mystery that people talk about in life. I don't have that. And, I was 35 and I thought, okay, maybe I have another 35 years to go. Who knows? Um, but if this is how life is going to be, it's going to be pretty boring. So there must be another way. There must be a different way of living. So I just had that question and the willingness to just say, okay, well, I'll explore, see what happens. And I was lucky enough to find the right kind of people, community, guides, um, that I did manage to see some of these things. For example, I'll tell you one of the workshops I attended. So it was a men's workshop, and there was this an exercise where we had to, like, really let our anger out. So we were doing like a shadow boxing kind of exercise. And me, who just didn't feel any intense emotion, I was laughing at it. They're like, yeah, this, I don't get angry. That's just not me. I just don't get angry. So I was just laughing. I laughed through that exercise, but something shifted uh, in that exercise for me, because the next day I was going back to the workshop, and I remember I was on the tube, and the tube was like literally 5 seconds delayed. Like I was sitting in, and it was just like not moving. And this rage came up. I literally had this out of body experience, as if I was like getting up from my seat and like kicking the door of the tube. And I was surprised. It's like, whoa, where did that come from? And there was just like uh, this sliver of light, which was like, oh, okay, well, there's something here for me to look at, which I never really thought about. There is rage in there. Something shifted on the exercise. So I started following that path. I was like, okay, what else is there? What else is there? So I was willing and I was curious to keep investigating what else might be there. And then, to the point that I have a lot more access to those emotions in a volitional way, in that I can access my anger when I need to and want to, as opposed to it having control over me. And I think that ultimately is the goal of if there's something called the work, which is you allow yourself to feel all of these emotions, and at the same time um, have the choice what to do with them. And you can only do that if you've gone through those emotions in a conscious way and learned about them and make friends with them.
Was there, because I know we're talking about how you felt very numb, you lacked feeling certain emotions. Was there a point when perhaps fear or feeling scared came creeping in? Because for some people, I'm sure that are listening, are thinking, like, I know I need to do it, but I'm so terrified that I'm going to open a gate and all of these floods of emotions that I've been putting off for years and years and years come bang in my face. Like, how on
Yeah,
earth will I cope with that?
totally. I
Mm.
mean, for sure. Yeah, um I think there's a few things I would say. Yes, it happens, yet it is bound to happen. So having the right kind of people around you is really important, in that uh having someone who can hold space for you, a guide, a mentor, a coach, a therapist, who you can work with as these things come up. It helps if you have some kind of a community. You're surrounded by like-minded people who are all exploring um, themselves and going through something similar, which was the case with me. I was part of a community as I was doing this work. I still remember there was this this moment where um, so my part of my personal growth work was through conscious sexuality. And I was while I was engaged with a someone, and we were doing some exercise, and I got scared by how much pleasure my partner was experiencing, in that their loud moan during an exercise, there was so much pleasure and joy in there that I got scared, and I didn't realize what happened. I was like, whoa, I just had this reaction, but it doesn't make sense to me. Why? Like, it's all good thing, but why am I feeling scared? And then after doing some self-inquiry work, I realized that I had created this idea that if I allow myself to be too happy, the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to go down. Like, I'm going to be experiencing really low lows, because somehow I have created this belief that after every um, happy, joyous moment, life goes to shit. So I had blocked myself from feeling that. And then this moment, this fear came up. It's like, oh my God, you're happy. Watch out. What's coming next? So that's just one tiny example of the kind of things that can come up for you. So having a guide, a community, and I would say some kind of practices to look at your own emotions, your thought process. So self-inquiry practices are really, really important.
I was going to ask you if you had any coping mechanisms, and obviously you listed some there. And community, I think, is a huge one. And I think it's misinterpreted in a different sense. I think when people talk about the mind and building resilience and mental health, they think of communities that are built around those topics. And there's actually a run club local to me.
Mm,
And we've discussed more about mental health and personal development in that club than I ever thought would ever
yeah,
be achievable. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes it's finding something you like and knowing that there are actually many people out there, because we all go through it. When you're in those moments, you think it's just you. And you think no one will understand. And if I go to a run club or a boxing club or something that's totally, we aren't there to feel emotional in the slightest. We're there to do an action and leave. You'll be amazingly surprised of how some
yeah,
people open up to you in those moments. And you're like, oh my gosh, because it's a sense of community, like you said.
exactly, exactly. I would just add that yes, and there are, if you're going through something intense like relationship related or let's say if you're doing shadow work, it's good to have a community that understands those concepts as well. Because what you don't want to do is, if you're working on doing your shadow work and you go to a run club and start talking about all the all the things that you're learning about yourself that people might not understand, outside the context. So there's uh, generally having people around who are supportive of and open to discuss emotions and holding space is, I think, that in itself is a great start.
How did you take that plunge? Because when I read about a workshop, I think it was a workshop you held, and I think it was you initiating the "I'm not feeling okay" talk that
Mm.
unraveled the other men in the group to actually be able to open up. But for you, when you're going through this on your own and you're like, right, I need to recognize this, I need to take the next step, but I've suppressed this feeling for so long, how on earth do I then begin to take step one by opening up to even one individual? How did you do that?
It happened when you're in a community, because I think what you need a feedback loop. Um, I was actually reading about this thing today. I think a lot of our personal development is very self development work. What I've come to realize is that we're missing a big piece around relational aspect in that personal development. Because what relational aspect does is it creates a feedback loop. So for me, one big part was, how am I showing up with other people? Uh, that was a big part of my understanding of who I was through that lens. I had my own ideas of who I was, but then in a community started to get reflection back. It's like, oh, you come across in this particular way. And then I had to take the feedback and look at what feels true to me and what doesn't feel true to me. So I had to develop that lens as well. It's like, okay, not everything that I get back is necessarily true, because people say things out of their own projection as well. So developing that capability to say, okay, well, yes, the feedback loop, and um, having enough of a felt sense and ability to trust your feelings in such a way that you can tell, okay, yeah, I can see there's some truth in what you're saying because I can feel it in my body. But there's other things that you're saying that doesn't feel like it's mine, that might be yours, or I can just let go of that. So that feedback loop is what helped me, in going through a lot of these things. And I started to look at that as research. For example, I once one of my mentors said, "Oh, Kapil, I think you created a lot of intrigue with people," and I didn't understand what that meant. Um, it's like where I'm saying something, but I'm promising something else. I'm creating intrigue to, like, oh, there's these possibilities in our connection, for example. So I set up a research with 6 people. It's like, every time I'm talking to you, if you ever feel like I'm creating intrigue, please tell me. You know, and I did that for like 30 days, and I learned a lot about myself, like this kind of phrases I would use, where I would insert them. Having those conversations with people allowed me to do a lot of self inquiry. It was like, oh, why? And then I had my own self inquiry. Look at, why did I do that? What was the reasoning? Because there's a lot of conditioning that I came up with, where I was uh, programmed to talk to people in a certain way. So that, I don't know if that answers your question, but it wasn't like one decision. It was uh, putting myself in an environment where people were all doing their own self-inquiry work and the relational work. Had it be that more and more things, it's like opening a Pandora's box. I was like, oh my God, there's these 100 things that I got to work on. And then you take one thing at a time and you work on that.
I actually love this feedback loop concept. I think it's so valid. And a big reason for that is having that open communication. Because I don't know if you've ever felt this way before, but I have many a time walked into a situation and felt someone perceive me differently. And I'm playing all these thoughts into my head and I'm predicting what they're feeling. And I actually I thought about this the other day, and like, I'm predicting that they're judging me, but I'm judging them first by making that prediction. I have nothing to take that on other than I've walked into a room and felt a certain way, and I've put two and two together and decided that's the outcome before even someone opening their mouths to me. It's crazy how we do that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's complicated by the fact that there is a what we see and what experience we have, which is cognitive and our subconscious mind telling us based on our previous experiences. But then there's also a felt sense, like our limbic brain is scanning for all the sensations and feelings in the room. So if we're not aware of that, that influences our judgment and thought process as well. So for example, if you walk into a room, and someone's really angry, someone's really pissed off, you can feel that,
Yeah.
right? And that's our limbic brain scanning the room for emotions. So in that way, like that's a slightly extreme example. But when we walk into a room, like everyone's feeling everyone else. We don't think about it that way. So it's past experiences and judgments, yes, but also the felt sense, the transmission of that felt sense is also part of the equation.
I tell you, some of the best coping mechanisms I've found, or self-help, mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, that's just helped me to just tick a little bit better, is actually reading up or listening to podcasts on how the brain works. Because being able to understand anxiety or depression, or why you're overthinking, or why you're under processing anything like that, and being able to take it back and be like, no, this is because there's something going on in how the human behavior works. And I did so much deep dive into actually a lot about how we feel towards anxiety today is from our ancestors and our ancestors' brain. And it's weird to think about it, because you think when you grow up in, I grew up in the 90s, late 90s, that's all I'd know. It's from 96 and onwards. And so however I've grown up, nature, nurture, whatever you want to call it, that's how I've transitioned. So how could anything hundreds of thousands of years ago be affecting me now? But it's to do with how we're formed and how we become humans.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those traits we take back from that. And a big one for me was like fight or flight, and how we can't tell the difference between a lion or a car coming at you versus a boss sending you an email.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes we react in certain ways. It's
Totally.
yeah, it's something peaceful about understanding that this isn't just you being irrational. Like there's something going on to make you feel this way, and it's never as simple as like one pinpoint thing. It takes a lot of like deep diving in yourself and unraveling to really work that out. And again, that takes a lot of time. Time is the biggest
It
healer,
does
and I
take
think people
time.
forget that.
Yeah. It does take time. I often say to people who I work with, these are people usually they're anywhere between mid 30s to all the way mid 60s. I give this analogy that quite often what happens is that we've been walking on this path in this forest for a number of years, 30, 40, 50 years. And then one day we realize, oh my God, I got to find my way. I'm lost. I've got to find my way to the civilization. But then our mind is like, no, I want to find this way right now. I can't wait. Like, I need to find it right now. I need the solution right now. So our mind is kind of like, in our culture, we want that immediate gratification. And that's the thing to understand is that, no. If you've spent 30, 40, 50 years down this path, it might take a year or 2 years to find your way to civilization. It probably won't take 30 years. It probably won't take 40 years, but it might take a couple of years. So give yourself that time and do the work, and then see a couple of years down the line, you realize, and I can guarantee you, if you're someone who's curious, who's willing, who's seeking for the answers, you will find your own path, whatever that path is. The way I look at it is like there's this hallway with loads and loads and loads of doorways. People find their own door that aligns, that feels resonant to them, and all of them lead to exactly the same place. What modality you choose is totally up to you.
And I think we want everything yesterday. Very
Right.
human nature. To actually pause and slow down is a much harder task than people realize. I wanted to ask you a little bit, and it will probably sound funny, but what's your relationship with love like now? Because you obviously touched on talking about intimacy. You've talked on having a divorce and that being a very pivotal moment in your life, actually. It changed the course of the next years for you. How are you still hopeful? Like, how do you walk into love now? How do you change the relationship you had learned for so long about suppressing your feelings and being emotional with someone to now walk out into a new relationship and own it?
Yeah, I'm married for the second time. We've been together for 12 years. And I think if there was like a definition for love, that's definitely changed in that um, people talk about unconditional love. And my definition of unconditional love now is love in all conditions, right? And it's a practice. So how I look at relationship um, is changed. It's almost like a new paradigm of relating in there, that relationship is research, relationship is practice, relationship is work. I think uh, in the past, the way I looked at relationship was more acquisition. Like I liked someone, I was attached to them emotionally, I love them, and then I need to have them. And once I have them, now I have them, I don't need to really put that much work in, which is what most traditional relationships are like. This Disney idea of like walking into the sunset holding hands and, forever be happy without doing any work. I don't think life happens that way. I think you have to put in conscious work uh, in relationships. So my relationship to relationship has changed. I look at it as, you know, communication, honesty, authenticity, working, like building a strong foundation of friendship um, is absolutely crucial in any what I like to call conscious relationships. Um, and I think with love, I would say through the work that I've done, a long time ago, I had this moment where I was going through heartbreak. This is after like a year into when I started doing my own personal growth work. And it was painful. And I had this conscious thought. I was like, oh, wow. I, al- with every cell in my body, I want to close my heart again. And I had this thought that, oh, but if I want to really feel alive, I've got to keep my heart open, because heartbreak's probably one of it's hard, but it is also one of the places where we feel the most alive. Like everything, we can feel everything in that moment. So I made that conscious choice in that moment. And I think ever since it's not that I'm always able to, that's my practice, in that I try and live my life with my heart open, um, allowing kindness in situations where I can really do that. And I think that's what love is for me. It's like freedom for who I am with, either as a friend or family or partner. I want them to be free in all circumstances, um, all conditions.
What I think's particularly tricky for people coming out of heartbreak is this recognition of having to work on yourself and having to maybe address where you could have done better. And you can agree or disagree, but I think a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves after that moment to, I have to be fixed before going into the next relationship.
Yeah.
And I was speaking about this online a while ago, and it was something that really kind of popped off and resonated with a lot of people. And it's that I think that's wrong, thinking you have to go into your next relationship feeling like you're cured from something, because we all have different seasons forever. How I can't physically walk into anything knowing that the rest of my life is going to be close to perfect because I've listened and learned. I'm going to be taking on your baggage, your past, as much as you're going to be taking on mine. And I think it's really walking in with some more self-belief learning a bit more about yourself, understanding what's good for you and what wasn't. And they're the things that you work on between your past relationship and your next one, rather than putting a lot of pressure and guilt and this weight on your shoulders to say, right, I was clearly an issue. How do I go into the next one not having it with the same outcome? Did you find that?
Yeah, I agree. I was actually having this conversation yesterday with somebody, um, and it all goes back to the feedback loop.
Yeah.
Relationships give us the feedback loop. Um, Having said that, if it depends where you are in your life. If you're somebody who gets into a relationship to run away from yourself, then it might not be a bad idea to spend some time falling in love with yourself first. Um, Not necessarily just like spend next few years, but recognizing that um, you're using relationships to hide something or to run away from yourself. That is one thing. And I would say sometimes um, learning some tools, like, oh, I'm really not very good at authentic communications or being honest. So taking some time out to learn about yourself in those ways. And then when you're in the relationship, uh, testing how you're doing, but also like creating a relationship where two or more people who are in that relationship have that uh, agreement that they will support each other in each other's growth to be the best versions of themselves. I think that is important, and that's where the feedback loop comes in. Quite often, what happens is that we go into a relationship when one person is willing while the other person is not willing, and we go into like some kind of attachment, and then we suffer. It's like, oh wow. Then it sometimes doesn't feel like there is that feedback loop all the time, perhaps, which happens quite a lot. Like not everyone is willing to do the internal work. Um, so that's kind of my perspective on that. But the way I look at it, feedback loop is crucial, and relationships are the people laugh when I say it, but if you are someone who wants personal growth, get into a relationship and make that conscious. There is no more intense playground to become a better version of yourself than being in a relationship, whatever form of relationship it is, because your partner is going to be your mirror, and they will continuously be showing all the good and the ugly parts of yourself that you will have.
Mm. And that's
No, there's no hiding.
people fear feedback tremendously, don't they? Like we
Yeah.
talk so much about feedback in the corporate realm, but actually with the relationships you have in your personal life. And I remember actually I asked an ex-partner that question um, because I did want to work on myself, and it's very hard to hold the mirror up to yourself and to because in those moments, I don't think most people, like majority of people, walk into any relationship, argument, or outcome trying to be malicious. I just think we get trapped in being a certain way, and unless we're told that that's hurting someone, we really don't know. And so you keep repeating the same process. And for me, I used to be, not as much now, but very emotional person. And it felt like someone was walking on eggshells around me because to handle an argument, I would cry. And that's a very hard emotion to deal with when you're also in that relationship feeling like you have to get your point across too. But because you've made someone sad, you feel like you have to stop and shut it down and you can no longer have your peace. And that was a big eye opener for me because even though I didn't go in with intent to make you feel like you couldn't have your say, I was just being emotional and felt comfortable enough to release that. I was releasing it too much and not being conscious that there was two people there. So the feedback
Yeah.
loop saved my current partner, I think.
Amazing. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Mm.
That's what it is, for one partner to say, oh, hey, when you are in that state, it's great that you are. This is how I feel. And for you to be able to hear that, oh, wow, okay, I didn't realize that was happening. How do we find a common ground? we're not trained to have relationships that way. We're not. There is no training. We just like this is so interesting. I find like we grow up learning about all sorts of things in terms of professional stuff, but nobody ever teaches us anything about relationship. It's always like, oh no, get into a relationship and figure it out.
Yeah.
Just thrown at the deep end. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So
100%.
I love it. That's a beautiful example.
I love that you've talked about the feedback loop, but there was something else we'd mentioned quite a lot actually in our conversation before hitting record, and that was that you teach the performance to presence method. And I wondered if you could share how that framework looks today.
Yeah, it's a framework that I have created based on my own experience as someone who lived a lot of my life striving, ticking boxes, performance, status, money. That was a primary goal, or ultimately to find happiness, but through that part, and realizing that ticking all those boxes didn't really give me the joy, the happiness, the fulfillment. Um, and so my experience has been that what I was missing was like really cultivating attention, bringing presence. We call it emotional intelligence, or being in my body. When I started my own work, if somebody had talked about connection or empathy, I could understand the concepts, but I didn't really fully understand it in an embodied way. So building a relationship with my own emotions, my feelings, my sensations, my body, the learning how to regulate my emotions, understanding who I am, how I created my own identity, you know, over 35 years. Uh, who am I when I'm connecting with people in different ways at work, with my friends, in my romantic relationships, in my friendships? Like, who is this guy? What kind of archetypes what kind of masks I put on when I'm with people? So, uh, so I've created a framework that has four key areas. One is like really just understanding your own identity in a way that, oh, how did you get to where you got to now? Uh, you know, how, Meg has certain cultural conditioning, belief system. What is your relationship to your boundaries? How do you show up in victim consciousness? You know, what kind of archetypes do you play with different people in life? So those are kind of the things that create our identity. So understanding that is what creates a good foundation um, for the work. And then I'd look at uh, what internal skills we need. So, for example, a lot of us are just not connected with our body. We don't have very good attention. We don't have very good listening skills. Or we don't really understand the masculine, feminine energies and how they really interact out of the conditioned way that we've been brought up with. You know, so there's quite a few internal skills. So I just pick and choose which ones are resonant with people where they are. And then two other things that I have in my framework. One is practices. So I feel that to create any kind of sustainable change in our life, we've got to have some kind of discipline. We've got to have some kind of regular practices so that it's like your time on the mat on a regular basis, which is what I call slow practice. And you create that feedback loop in your life. So when you go out and live your life, which is when you're in flow practice, you're living your life, whatever you do on the mat shows up in life. And then what happens in life becomes the feedback loop for your slow practice. So that's the third part of my framework. And the fourth one is um, this concept, the philosophy that I have got from James P. Cars, who talks about the finite and infinite game. So how do you live your life as an infinite game? Which is you live your life because it's a game and you play the game as opposed to trying to win or lose all the parts, which is a finite game. So quite often when we look at relationships, we look at work, we look at um, pretty much any part of our life, we bring in the finite idea of, I need to win here, I need to be better than. And how do you move from that to a more infinite game concept and philosophy? So there's like rules of play in life that I bring in. So those are kind of like four key areas that I've put together because I have gone through that sort of experience. And I, depending on who I'm working with, we pick and choose. Creating a foundation is important, but outside of that is like, okay, what is more resonant in your life, and then you bring in all of those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. I was just thinking how much you've taught me, in this conversation, because as much as you do that with people, I know there's people listening that will be able to self-reflect and get a piece of paper out and jot down what you've written and just kind of map out some ideas in their mind that they can take away from this conversation. I think the biggest thing you've taught me, and it was when we first originally met and jumped on a call, I remember speaking to you about being grateful and being happy and always feeling like in life, will we ever be fulfilled or content? And it's a big, big thing for me because I'm terrified that will I ever feel like I have enough, and I think that's because every goal you set, every thing you put out into the world, like the goalpost always moves. There's always different seasons of life. It's a roller coaster to be on planet Earth. And you said to me, unless you become grateful, you'll never be happy with more. And I wondered if you could just share like exactly what that means for you today, because I know it touched me and left me with something. But for yourself, what does it mean?
Thank you for saying that. Very kind. There's a radical concept that my teacher taught me, is that we are all perfect with room to grow. So quite often, I think we are taught that there's something wrong with us, and we're always chasing perfection. And I like the idea of that there's already abundance, because I think to me, and I think a lot of people will disagree with me, but to me, when I'm saying uh, I'm not perfect, it's not like being arrogant, but if I'm saying I'm not perfect and I need to be perfect, I'm coming from scarcity. Like there's something scarce which I need to accumulate or do something to become abundant. And the way I relate to that idea, that, and people who are spiritual or religious, why would God create something that's imperfect? Like when we look at nature, we say, oh wow, nature is perfect. Like uh, a leaf, a flower. It's like all of those things, we look at them and say, oh wow, they're perfect. But we don't do that with ourselves. So what if, just for uh, a little moment, we say, okay, we're perfect with a room to grow. And I think the same idea that we suddenly are in the frequency of abundance. Like we already have a lot. It's not that we don't want more. We do want more. We have desires. We still want to be in our self-expression. We still want to see what we are capable of and what our potential is, but not from lack, not from scarcity, but because uh, we are all artists and we want to see what we can create on the canvas of our life, right? So I think gratitude is part of that concept, in that if we are grateful for what we already have, that our cake is already amazing, you know, and we really bring attention to what we currently have. We open up this idea that we can have more, because otherwise we are always in the lack of something. We're always in scarcity. And in Buddhism, there's this idea of hungry ghost, which is like the idea that uh, it can eat anything, but it never gets filled. It's hungry ghost stomach is empty, it's hollow, so it keeps eating but never gets satiated. So gratitude is something that actually satiates us. It brings into light what we already have, and we can receive it, fully receive it. And when we do that, it acts as an expansion so that we can actually go, okay, well, now I want to have more. What can I have more? Otherwise, we're just in that loop of like wanting more, but never having anything, which is what happens, and I was there too. It's like every year I would set a goal and I would definitely achieve the goal, but not really fully receive it. Because as soon as I achieved the goal, I was already like, oh, what's my next goal? Never really able to appreciate it, never really be able to actually have it and celebrate it and, eh, you know, bathe in the havingness of that thing.
Hmm.
I don't know, long-winded answer to your question, but I
No,
hope that
it
makes
was,
sense.
it was poetic. I love your explanation. I, for me, it really was. It goes back to getting a promotion and working very, very hard for that promotion. And then the minute I had the promotion, I was like, on to the next. Couldn't even reap the reward of it. It was just like consistently chasing. And I remember someone saying to me, the goalposts will always move. And it just stuck with me. And when we had the conversation and I asked you, I remember asking you, like, how do we ever feel fulfilled with that? And you said, I think it is to be more grateful. And it opened up my eyes to my recent trip to South Africa. And, before I went away, like, life's never easy. We go through the motions. I was going for a particularly difficult time anyway, but I had a roof over my head, a great partner, family close by. I had money. I could afford things. I was, to anyone, the the average Joe, doing pretty well. Um, but I still felt like there was something missing. Like, how can I not be grateful for what I have? It's just become my everyday. It's mundane. It's life to life. I expect to wake up every day and have what I have because it is what it is. Went to South Africa, came back, and for the first time ever, I was like, I feel lucky just being born where I am. I feel grateful that I get to wake up this morning and have the opportunities I have presented to me. Everything I had taken for granted or taken for granted before, I was starting to feel grateful for. And I really think it was stepping outside of my bubble and my day to day that helped me to see that. And I know we speak a lot about how to practice gratitude is to write down, 3 or 5 things every day that you love, things that went well that day. And I've started to do that, and I like it because it will be a reminder to come back and look on, because it's quite easy to forget what happened in the last 6 months. I forget what happened for dinner last night, let alone the last 6 months of my year, to see how far you've come. But really, it was, like I say, stepping out of my comfort zone and then coming back and getting that perspective. And I feel like I'm happy with more. And I'm like, it really did change everything for me. Sounds
Amazing.
dramatic.
Well, no, it's not really. It's beautiful. It's because I think quite often we can talk about a lot of things, we can read about a lot of things. It's only when we put things in practice. Um, so all of the things that we've talked about, we can talk about these concepts, but until this path is very experiential, you've got to be ready to face some of these demons. You got to be ready to put in some hours and practices and put in the time on the mat, as they say, um, to see the changes. And when we do, I think, uh, I would say people are always surprised how quickly things start to shift. At least at some of the core things shift pretty quickly. So beautiful. Yeah, no, it feels great to hear like that part of you and that it had that impact.
Yeah. And it feels really comfortable to share it with you. So I'm super grateful for your time. I wondered before we go, if there was anything, something like maybe a book recommendation or a podcast or an action to leave the audience with today. If someone's feeling like this inspired me, but what's going to motivate me next to take next action and work towards something, does something come to mind?
I was gonna actually say, the gratitude part. I can uh give like the framework for the gratitude that might be useful for your audience that I use, which is slightly different from how most people talk about gratitude. Mostly when we talk about gratitude, it's like, oh, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful that I'm breathing. I'm grateful for blah, blah, blah. Or I'm grateful for a person, right? Which is good, which is good. I think I go one step further in that, talk about who you're grateful for. So, I'm grateful for, let's say, my trip to South Africa, right? But after that, add how that thing or that person made you feel. Because what that does is it puts you in that moment when you're writing, when you're thinking how it made you feel, you're reliving that moment. And when you're reliving that moment, you're in the frequency of gratitude. And when you're in the frequency of gratitude, you're transmitting it to the world, right? So adding, I am grateful for my trip to South Africa. It had me feel my life is abundant. It had me feel love. It had me feel free. So as soon as you talk about those emotions and how it feels, you're reliving those emotions and you're transmitting it to people around you, to the environment around you.
I
So
love
that's
that.
one simple tweak
Mm,
to gratitude is
yeah.
hopefully that's a good offer.
I love that. Add a bit more detail to it, isn't it? I think a lot of the I'm grateful for comes across a little bit vague and then it doesn't really sink or set in and it becomes a chore. Oh, like, I woke up this morning, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my coffee. I'm grateful for my dog. I'm grateful that I slept well. Cool. Next thing. And like even saying it out loud, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's what everyone's grateful for because it's the norm that we're lucky to have. And I know that we should appreciate those little things, but how can we dive a bit deeper into so it sinks? I think that's a
And
huge
it
thing.
forces us to really feel into what is it about that person or idea or place that has it feel that we are grateful. Yeah.
I'm grateful for your time today. We've gone well over the hour. Honestly, I knew I knew there was going to be something about this conversation, but I'm super excited that we dived into several different aspects and there was a lot that people can take away and actually be working on following up from this episode. So I'm very thankful for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great. I love it. I love talking about these things.